So, just want to say thank you to those folks who led worship while I was away. I haven't had any tapes yet, so I haven't been able to view it, but nevertheless, I know that they always do a good job, and so I'm content that nobody's come back to me to complain. Therefore, I'm assuming it was okay. But thank you for that. We're nearly at the end of John's Gospel. I hope there have been things in it as we've gone through that have challenged you or excited you or encouraged you, things that you've maybe not come across before, ideas that are there in the way John tells the story. But we're not quite finished. There's two more parts of this gospel to go. And my prayer for us in these last 2 weeks is that God will continue to speak to us through, first of all, this miracle of the catch of fish, and then next week in the theme of reconciliation and bringing Peter back and showing forgiveness. Jesus used fishing as an example very often through his ministry. He used it as an example of kingdom power to save and to provide. Do you know what an ichthus is? Loads of people going, You may have seen it. One or two do. Okay, so I think I've got a little picture. I'm hoping I've got a little picture which will show you an ichthus. It's a fish. You sometimes see it on the backs of cars, the wee fish logo. And that's what it's called. It's called an ichthus. It's the Greek word for fish. And it became a sign, a symbol for Christians in the early church when they were being persecuted. It was a kind of secret code, if you like, when folk would use that symbol. It's sometimes nowadays known as the Jesus fish. But if you use an acronym of the letters, the Greek letters of that word, it stands for Jesus Christ, God's Son, Savior. So it was to help people remember. According to tradition, ancient Christians, as they were being persecuted by the Roman Empire in the days of the early church, used that symbol to mark places where they could meet in safety. And if they were traveling, and sometimes what they would do is they would be chatting, and in the dust at the roadside, they would make one half of the fish. And if the other person was a believer, they would make the other half, and you would know that you were talking to somebody you could trust. When we were on holiday, I seem to go on holiday all the time. That's not really true. It was just a different example. When we were on holiday a few years ago, we were in France, and we went to this theme park, and they had a Roman amphitheater, huge thing. And they were promoting the live lions and tigers that they had in the amphitheater. It could be quite interesting. So we went there with thousands of people. And the first thing that happened was this fellow came on dressed as a slave, and he had a stick. And in the 4 different bits, so everybody could see, he drew the first part of the fish. And then somebody dressed as a Roman centurion came on and did the other bit. And they told the story of this Roman centurion who had come to faith and how he was found out and he was to be fed to the lions. And they had real lions and tigers and leopards and all of that in this thing. Fortunately, they had big fences so they couldn't get out. But I thought, in France, of all places, here they are telling the story of faith and how Christians were persecuted and in the face of persecution stood up in faith. Here we are in this story today, these disciples. And they didn't stand up in faith at the time when they could have. They ran away and they abandoned Jesus. And here's Jesus, and we see in the story how he is revealed. So the first thing that we need to know is that Jesus' appearance is always timely. It's always the right time. As you read through the New Testament, you see time and time again, people write, at just the right time, at just the right time. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It was at just the right time that Jesus was born. And so on. So it's always on time, but it's always his time. I don't know how often I have waited and said, come on, wait. And you've prayed for something and prayed for it, and you're getting really frustrated because it hasn't happened. But it's not his time. And we've got to wait for that. I suspect Peter's denial would still be rumbling around in his head, thinking to himself, well, I really blew that, didn't I? Really messed that one up. Got that really wrong. And so I'm just going to go home. I'm going to go back to Galilee and do what I know best. It may be that, they were just being human. They needed to eat and they went for fish, because that's what fishermen do. It may be that, they had run out of money because Judas had kept the money. And Judas wasn't there anymore, and we were never told what happened to it. It could be that they were actually being obedient to the message that the angels gave the women, go to Galilee and I'll meet you there. We don't actually know, and it's very easy to be critical of them, saying how stupid they were. But actually one of the things is that we all do that to some extent when we're uncertain and we're unsure. We go back to what we know. And part of the whole thing about path of renewal, that process, when they were thinking about it, was because that's what we do as the church. We could think back to years gone by when you would send busloads of people off on the Sunday school trip, and there'd be streamers everywhere, and it'd be great. I was on those buses. It was great fun. And if you became vacant because your minister moved on or retired, there was no problem. You would get another minister. You might even get half a dozen people applying for your vacancy. But times are different. We have 238 vacancies for ministry. Many congregations have no Sunday school at all, and most of us have very few young people. Things are different. And so the idea that the church really takes on is we do what we know, and we know how to do a Sunday service, so we just need to do it better. We need to have better musicians. Sorry, David. We need to have better reading and praying. We need to have better ministers. We just need to do the same, but we need to do it better. It doesn't work. And here's these folk, and they've gone, and they're back to what they knew. And then here comes Jesus. They'd fished all night. They were doing what they were good at and caught nothing. But when Jesus says, put your nets over that side, they do it. And they get more than they could ever have bargained for. And this event has really powerful resonance for these disciples. Because in Luke chapter 5, verses 1 to 11, Jesus had done exactly the same. He's turned up. In this case, he got into the boat because there were so many people, and he said to them, can I borrow your boat? And you can imagine, they've been there all night, they're washing the nets, because you've got to wash them and mend them, or they rot. So they're cleaning their nets, and he comes along and says, here, can I borrow your boat? You just see Peter, oh, well, all right, if you must. And they go out, and he begins to speak. Now, how long does Jesus teach? Do you know, could it be 3 hours? We don't know. Could have been 10 minutes. We have no idea, but they're sitting there waiting, like, wouldn't have a watch, but come on. The sun's going down now. Need to get to bed. And then Jesus says, going to put your net out. Just wash the nets. Just clean the net. You want to put the net out? Aye, come on, put the net out. And they caught so many fish. They had to invite other people in other boats to come and help them. And there were so many fish that the boats began to sink and the nets began to break. And it was at that point that these disciples, Peter and the others, fell to their knees and said, Lord, get away from me. It was at that moment they realized there was something entirely different and unique about Jesus. It was at that point Jesus said to them, come on and follow me, and I'll make you fishers of people. And Jesus sets the whole thing up again. Going to give me your net? Just stick it over there. And they have this huge catch of fish. He knows that they feel that they've failed. He knows that they think the kingdom that they had planned for is gone. He knows that they're really struggling. He gets that. And so what does he do? He takes them back to the beginning. He takes them back to that point where they first realized he was special and unique. He takes them back to that first time when he said, come and follow me. And they said, yes, Lord, we'll follow you. After everything that's happened, the great news is that even if we go back to our old ways, Jesus is willing to start over. Even if we've really messed up, even if we've done something in life and we think, I can never be forgiven for that. I'll never get over that. What Jesus says is, I'll forgive you. Let's start over. In Luke chapter 5, verses 10 and 11, he says, don't be afraid. From now on, you'll fish for people. So they pulled up their nets, they pulled up their boats on the shore, they left everything, and they followed him. It's just a reminder to them of that day and how they followed him then, and they can follow him now. And then secondly, his appearance is compassionate. We must not miss the essence of this story. Jesus appears in a resurrected body and he shows off his divine power, but he's real. He's having breakfast with them. He's actually eating the bread and the fish. He's not just a ghost. He's real and he's there and he's human as well as divine. The term for friends that's used in some of the older translations is actually children. And he's saying to them, children, have you caught any fish? But that word, that tone, the way he speaks, it's the tone and care of a father, somebody who loves them and cares for them and wants what's best for them. These disciples, he's saying, really are the adopted children that God the Father has entrusted to Jesus. They were the future church. They were his, bought with a price. And Jesus' question, do you have any fish, demonstrates the care that God has for us in our temporal, everyday needs as well as in our spiritual life. He's promised that his grace will always be sufficient. Verse 9 of the reading says, when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you've caught. Jesus didn't need them to catch the fish. Jesus had his own fish and he had his own bread. He didn't need them. Sometimes when we are speaking about the kingdom, it's as if we have to do it all, and we do it in our strength. But actually, God doesn't need us to build his kingdom. God doesn't need us to sustain the church. But in his grace and mercy, he allows us to participate in his work. He encourages our service, not because he needs it, but because in that there is blessing and compassion and fellowship and friendship and grace. Because we learn and we grow and we become more like him as we do that. And it says not one of them doubted who this was. They knew that it was Jesus. So he takes the bread and the fish, and as he blesses it, imagine in their mind, they've gone back to the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000. Peter maybe thinking about how he had paid the tax when he had taken the coin from the mouth of a fish. Maybe as they sat there, they were reminded of how Jesus broke bread and gave them wine. Maybe they'd heard the story of the two folk on the Emmaus Road who recognized Jesus when he did that. You could spiritualize it if you really want, and take it a wee bit further and say Jesus cares for his body, the church. He wants us to be nourished and healthy, not emaciated, hungry, or destitute. He provides that example of how we should care for our own bodies, but he especially wants us to care for the church. He knows that they've not caught anything, and yet he asks them the question. Why does he do that? Well, it's not because he's having a go at them. It's because he wants them to realize their need. He wants us to realize our need and to rely on him. It shows his care for them and for us. Then his appearance is powerful. Another fish miracle, there's been quite a few of them through the Gospels. Jesus tells them specifically with the where and the how. See, when Jesus tells you something, you should actually just do it. It works out best that way in the long run. So, no, I'm never going to be a minister. Pfft, yeah, okay. When Jesus says, do that, you should just do it. How wide is the boat? 5 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet. They're not big boats. They're quite long, but they're not big boats on the Sea of Galilee. And at this side, nothing. And 6 feet away, so many fish. But it was when they did what Jesus said that they were blessed. Do we trust our own instincts and logic, or do we trust God to provide? 153, I don't know that there's any significance in that number except that it's big. There were quite a lot of big fish in the net, and it didn't tear. I think that was God's way of saying that the good news of the gospel will go out into the world, and there will be loads and loads of people over time who will come to him in faith. And the church will grow, and people will be saved. That's his plan and his purpose. It's to draw everyone that he's called into the presence of Jesus. And so, having seen all that, how did the disciples respond? So it's either, I couldn't work out what to do with this one. It's either the disciples' response or the church's resolution. I wanted to keep it an R, but I'm not entirely sure that it's that different. John, who wrote this gospel, the disciple who he says is the one that Jesus loved, he's quick to recognize Jesus on the shore. He was the one that caught on, oh, look, it's Jesus, woo! But it's Peter who's the first off the mark. He's the one that, for some reason, puts his coat on. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm jumping into the water, I want to take my coat off. You're just flicking now, aren't you? You're just clicking. I want to take my coat off. If I'm going in the water, he puts his coat on. I'm not really sure why. Some commentators say it was because when he got there, he didn't want to be unclothed in the presence of God. But he's there full of vigor and vim. He's off the boat. When he hears the word, it's the Lord. I wish I was a bit more like Peter sometimes. When folks say, it's the Lord, God's working there. I wish I was a bit more ready to go, right, okay, let's go and see how we can join in. So he's in the water. He wants somehow to deal with this denial that he has in his head about how he can get back with Jesus and how that can be restored and resolved. And we should actually commend him for his enthusiasm and for his zeal here. He really wanted to be with Jesus. He really wanted to see Jesus. He understood that he had done something he shouldn't do, but he wanted to be with Jesus. And nothing else really mattered. I wish I was a bit more like that sometimes as well. He wanted to revere Jesus, to worship him. He swims to shore. The other disciples dragging the fish in the boat, and as soon as they get in, Jesus says to them, bring some of that fish that you've caught. We'll get them in the fire. And who's the first one that's mentioned? Peter. Peter gets up and runs to help them. He doesn't say, oh, hang on a minute, I've just come for there. I'm not going back to get that. He's now there ready to help them to bring the fish in because he's being obedient to Jesus. The rest of the disciples aren't really mentioned. They're just there. They're there doing what they do. But they showed in what they did that they were devoted followers of Jesus. They weren't all as flamboyant as Peter. They weren't as profound and open to things as John. But they were careful, honest, mindful, faithful workers, not attention seekers, just devout Jesus followers. They were hard workers. They were there ready to help when the work needed to be done. Their example reminds us that we are called to serve Jesus and that we all bring different talents and abilities to that work. What were you called to be? Because God has a plan and a purpose for you that is different to the plan and the purpose for anybody else. What were you called to be? I don't know. I suspect most of you are old enough to have learned the song, I will make you fishers of men if you follow me. I'm not going to sing it, but you remember that song and the words there and the story today remind us of those early words to the disciples. Follow me and I will make you fishers of men or fishers of people. There are lots and lots of opportunities for service. And every one of us fits the mold of at least one of these disciples. Some of us are outspoken and brash. Some of us are more contemplative. Some work away quietly in the background. But everybody here has a valuable and important role to play in building God's kingdom. Don't ever let anybody tell you you've not. And don't ever be convinced yourself that you're not good enough, that you couldn't do it. Because God says something different. He says, come and follow me, and I'll make you fishers of people. Amen.